Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. As a bit of a plant propagation geek, I've been kind of curious about those people who propagate plants in water rather than potting soil. And I know this is mainly the people who do tropicals or indoor plants, but I've seen it in other contexts as well, and I wanted to give it a try. A few years ago I gave it a try with hydrangeas with moderate success, so I thought I would do a little more of a widespread experiment this time, and I want to show you some of the results. So first I should let you know what I did. I took my cuttings as normal. I took them a bit on the soft side, so either soft semi-hardwood or softwood tip cuttings, and I placed them into, instead of placing them under timed mist where I do most of my propagation, I brought them to this indoor environment where I have the lights and I have the temperature control, and I can make sure that the ones that are propagated in water have a very even set of circumstances to the ones that I'm propagating in the humidity domes. So this was about 2.5 weeks ago, 18 days since I've taken the cuttings, and now I wanted to show you some of the initial results. I will come back a little bit later in the video and show you the final results after I've established roots or killed most of them. So I'll get to that in just a minute, but let's get a close-up look at what's happened so far. So I took all of my cuttings from the same stages, but there's some interesting differences here. I'm going to point out first, this one is Rosa eglinteria. That's the plant that we're dealing with. And just to show you, get this out of the way right away, yes, there's some algae in the water. I didn't add any nutrients, but when you have light and you have water, you're going to get some algae. I've changed this water twice a week so far, so I think I've made 5 changes of the water. And you're still going to get some algae, so it's time for another change. You don't have that problem with the soil, so that's one thing to consider. But what I will show you is the difference here, because sometimes when I place plants in for cuttings, they begin to lose their leaves. They react to this transplant situation by losing their leaves. And it looks like this one has lost its leaves, or is losing its leaves, much faster than this one here. Actually, this cutting in the water did lose its leaves, but I have another one here of the ones in soil, and again, same thing, a marked yellowing and dropping of leaves as compared to the ones in the water. Now, as comparing the bottom edge of the cuttings, I'm probably going to have to get some different close-ups for these, but all I see on the bottom here is just a very, very minor callusing. So it could be that these were a little bit firm to develop quick callusing, but in any case, that's all we've seen so far, aside from the differences in the amount of leaf loss. Pulling it out from the soil here, I don't see a significant difference. I'm going to move on to the next variety here. And this one's kind of interesting, and even a more pronounced difference in the loss of leaves. So this is I took this from tip cuttings of figs. And not only do I have no loss of leaves, but on this one, I think I can probably say that the water method is a clear winner so far. And the reason I can say that, I'm zooming in here and see if I can get the details. Can you see those nubs across the bottom node and then a little further up the stem and at the next node? Those ones are callusing. So these figs look like they're developing roots in the water, and they haven't lost any leaves yet, or not anything significant. I see a little bit of yellowing in this section here, but I don't see any leaf loss. Now, comparing that to the ones that I did in soil, potting soil that is, you can see that these ones immediately dropped their leaves. Well, within the first 2 weeks they dropped their leaves. I don't also see on these ones any significant large callusing, although I do see a ring of callus along the bottom edge here. So I'm not giving up on these ones yet, but certainly the ones in water appear to be further ahead at this point. The third one I'm going to point out is this one here. I took tip cuttings of a blackberry. And this black stem across the top and the blackness across the bottom of the cutting indicates to me that these ones didn't make it. Now, I'm going to throw these away. Should note at the same time that the ones that I did in soil or potting soil reacted the same way. Blackness across the bottom, a black shriveled tip across the top. So I'm going to call it on the blackberries. I should say that the blackberries, I took those as quite a late and quite a soft cutting from the blackberries. So I'm not going to blame either method, just probably I took them from a very, very soft portion of the plant and they failed straight away. So no major difference between those. Next one I'm going to talk about is the hydrangea. These hydrangeas in water, pulling them out. I don't see too much of significant root development or any kind of callusing across the bottom. I maybe see some swelling in the bottom tissues, but I don't see a ton of root development there. They have held their leaves pretty well, so I'm going to say the jury's out on that one. The ones that I did in soil look similar. They've gone ahead and held their leaves. Let me tease one of them out here and just see if I can see what's happening on the bottom edge. And ooh, I think you're seeing what I'm seeing. This one has rooted. So at least as far as the hydrangea is concerned, I see significant rooting across the bottom edge of the cutting. Put it back in here. And so far as the hydrangea is concerned, then I'm giving the advantage over to the ones done in potting soil. Just seems a lot quicker, and I'm getting actual roots rather than just a little bit of callusing across the bottom. Next one I'm going to show you here, and final one I'm going to show you here, just about, is another landscape rose called Ferdy. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a close-up on the top here. From the time that I did the cutting, you're going to see here that we have new shoots on this rose. So it's actually started to send new shoots and foliage. So that's good news, I guess, but usually you want to see root development before you see shoot development. And what I'm seeing on the bottom edges is that there's no significant root development. There is a little bit of callusing. You see it with the swelling of the bottom edge of the stem, but no significant rooting. So, jury's out on that one. Let's see how it did in soil. Same landscape rose. The cultivar, by the way, is Ferdy. Those shoot developments are even more significant on this one. So again, mixed blessing. If you have shoots before you have roots, that can be a bad thing. But if you have some roots on there, then it's pretty good. And I'm pulling on this, and I'm actually giving it a decent amount of pressure, and it's pulling back. I believe that this one is actually rooted and anchored into the soil. I'm pull on this one, and just for the sake of a video, I'm going to forego the caution of disturbing the roots, and I'm going to pull it right out, and here's what I've ended up with. So that, I would have to say, is some excellent root development for something that's just about 3 weeks in the pot, compared to the one that was in the water where it did basically nothing, just a little bit of callusing on the bottom end of the stems. Now I'm going to pull that out of the way. and just show you that one other thing I've just recently thrown in. I'm not going to have any comparison for this, but I grabbed myself a stem of a houseplant. This would be a pothos, and threw that into the water just yesterday. So you wouldn't have seen any results on that one there, but I'm kind of hoping by the time I give you the final update on this that you'll see some roots on the pothos, because by reputation anyway, they're fairly easy to root in water. 2 more weeks have elapsed, and I'm going to call an end to the trial because the results are so clear. The ones propagated in soil are so far ahead of the ones propagated in water, it's getting ridiculous. Let me show you those close-ups now. I'll review the cuttings in the same order I did in the initial video. These two here are the Rosa eglinteria. This one propagated in water, and this one propagated in soil. If you'll recall from the first part of the video that the one in soil dropped its leaves initially, it is starting to grow back, a shoot at the top there, but really the issue on both of these is that these were taken in a fairly hardwood stage and are very slow to root both ways. So I'm going to call this one a tie. I'm not entirely sure if either one of those will make it, but let's move on to the next one, because here's where you'll start to see the differences. Looking at fig, and again we have the water propagation on the left, the soil propagation on the right. And what you'll see now is that the one done in water, although it had all that initially promising callus up and down the stem, it's kind of stalled out now, kind of doing nothing. The one that was propagated in soil, however, even though it lost its leaves relatively early, it has rooted pretty magnificently and is well on its way to being a viable plant. So now I have a clear winner on the figs, and that is the one propagated in potting soil. As you recall, the one that was the blackberry, they both failed, so that's a tie. Next, we look at the hydrangeas here, and the hydrangeas in the soil were far ahead already. By the time you saw it in the last video, they've even continued to develop along those lines. They've rooted down to the sides of the pot magnificently. The one that was in the water has started to develop some little rootlets actually quite near the top of the stem here. So those are on the way, but the clear winner in this case was the potting soil. Finally, this rose is called Ferdy, and these are the ones that were done in water, and you can see they are actually still stalled out at not rooting, whereas the ones that were done in soil have lots and lots of foliage on the top, but most importantly have rooted right down to the bottom of the pot now and are ready to move on to the next stage. So a clear winner there as well. It may be the case that I've chosen the wrong plants to really showcase the rooting ability of water. It was kind of taken from generally things I had in the garden at this time of year. I didn't get enough time to assess that pothos to see if it rooted well or not. So at least as my first trial, soil versus water, I would say the potting soil has a distinct advantage. One final note I'll mention is that as a production system, the water leaves something to be desired because it does get that algae so quickly. It's just such a mess trying to maintain that. As far as the work that I put into each method, the ones that were in water, I was in there replacing that water 2 to 3 times a week sometimes. This is only 2 days old, and you can see how scungy it already looks. One last thing I'll mention is that even if a plant develops roots in water, like it is on this hydrangea, those roots that are starting to develop on that stem, that's not a sure sign that you're past the finish line. I've had it before where I've developed a decent amount of roots on the stem and then transitioned into soil and then found that a lot of those roots suffered some kind of a dieback after going into the soil. What I've heard from people who do this propagation method a lot is that the roots are actually just quite different in the way that they grow in water versus when they grow in soil. So there's a a stress or a shock that comes along when you transition them back to soil. So for me, definitely the conclusion is I'm going to stick with potting soil wherever I can. And if I find a situation where water is the better rooting system, I'll let you know. Certainly, if that's your experience, go ahead and leave that in the comments below the video about which plants we should try water rather than potting soil. Thanks so much for watching.